Welcome in to another show of Behind the Wheelhouse. You're on with Jay and Jay. I'm John. This is Justin. Today we are joined by probably one of the sharpest minds in freight forecasting. He's shaking his head, but I'm sure he is. Jonathan Stark, CEO of FTR Transportation Intelligence. If you're operating a trucking company, manage brokerage capacity, make equipment decisions, or plan freight strategy, this is the kind of conversation that can probably shape your next 12 to 24 months. Am I correct in saying that, Jonathan?
We certainly hope so.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you grew up, how you got into this business. Looks like you've been here since 2002.
It's definitely a group affair when it comes to this company. Everybody dreams about going into freight transportation forecasting when they're younger. I know you guys certainly did as well.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
everybody has a path that gets them into transportation. Mine was I was coming out of college and I had a dual CD burner, and my brother called me up and said, "Hey, I'm working with FTR. We need to burn some CDs." To do some marketing material to send out. All right. This is back in 2001, 2002. So that was the first thing I ever did for FTR. I had no idea what they did. My older brother worked at some strange place. We had no idea what the heck he was involved in. And from there, I've done a little bit of everything within FTR. We started small, we've grown over the years, but I've had the opportunity to learn from a lot of great individuals who were in the industry for decades and decades. And they've misremembered more than I've ever learned or could glean from them. So it's been an amazing opportunity to really grow up as a fundamental analyst, looking at the industry from the outside from the very get go. I'm not anybody who's ever operated a trucking company or had to, deal with shipment operations. I'm somebody who's always been looking at it from the outside, trying to understand what's really driving changes in the marketplace and looking at the big picture whenever we can. Because for us, it's really about trying to be more strategic in your thinking, in your understanding, and in your decision making. And if we can help in those regards, helping you make better decisions and better planning, you're going to set yourself up for more success in the future. Yeah, you can always get into the weeds looking at,
Mhm.
what's happening with rates today, but there's also got to be opportunity to look out and try to get a bigger picture of what's happening and what it means for you and your industry.
Who are you solving problems for? Are you solving problems for the carriers, for the brokers, for shippers, all the above?
All of the above. It's really our goal to be a neutral third party viewpoint of what's really happening, right? We're not an advocate for trucking. We're not an advocate for the shipper's position. We're trying to understand what's really fundamentally driving conditions, right? Are things tightening? Are they loosening? Going to be a different environment, whether you're a shipper or a carrier. But our goal is to help you better understand what is that operating environment that you're stuck in, right? And how can you make the best of it? And how can you learn to grow and find the opportunities within there? It's not our job to tell you what's going to happen with the rate next week. It's our job to help you understand what's driving pressure in the marketplace and how can you best be prepared for that. Whether you're a shipper or a railroad or a trucking carrier or the financial equity people trying to understand what's happening within these operations as well.
So, and I know Justin wants to get a question here, but there's something that I'm just very curious about. Trucking goes in cycles, right? Almost cycles that you can count on. Why do we go in these cycles continuously every 2 to 3 years, whatever it is? And that's what I feel it is. Every 2 to 3 years, we're going in these cycles and it's nonstop. And I sold a trucking company, 65 trucks, and one of my main frustration always is like over the last 20 years, drivers have never seen a raise. Yes, they've seen the rates go up, and then they've seen them come back down, and then they go up, and okay, we're excited, but they never get beyond a certain point, except for COVID. COVID is just an anomaly. Can you go into that a little bit?
What is a cycle, right? And they had been somewhat consistent, and that made it easy to say that the cycle happened, you know, every 3 years, and it'd go up and go down, come back, and we do it again. But that's
Mhm.
not really what happens in the industry. What really happens in the industry is that things impact the industry from the outside and drive it up, right? And then it responds, and then it comes back down. So it's not that it just cycles because of time. It doesn't happen because of time. It happens because of pressure. And
Mhm.
usually, how that occurs is you just get demand that comes into the system, right? And so you got more freight to move. And as you build up more freight in the system, rates recover. That now allows you to bring in new drivers, grow your fleets, add in new capacity. Eventually, that demand stalls out and you stop adding new freight into the system. Now we've got too much capacity. Things have to cut for a period of time. You might even get like a recession or something in which demand itself comes down. All right. So now you got to spend some time getting back into the balance. And then eventually the goods environment always comes back, adds more demand into the system, and we repeat that. Okay. So that's what drives the cycle. The interesting
Mhm.
thing is how it got so disrupted going through the pandemic and coming out of it, that we didn't have this sort of normal timing environment. But if you looked at demand, demand never fell off significantly. It certainly came down from the highs that we were going through in 2021, 2022, but it never fell off a cliff like we were going through a bad recession.
Right.
But it stuck there for a very long period of time. And so then the market had this big high of these really high rates. We brought in all that capacity. We had to spend the time to bring that capacity back in line. Now, a lot of people will call out the regulatory and the enforcement stuff that has happened, and it's had an impact, but that's not really the driving impact. We've actually been whittling capacity for over a year and a half, probably 2 years, in which we've really seen the capacity environment come back into balance. All right.
Mhm.
So the enforcement stuff has come at the tail end of most of that. And it's certainly been a part of it. It's certainly a driving function of it. And it can continue to have more impacts as we go through this year. But it's not the solitary item that kind of turned the market around. It had been working for a long time to really whittle out some of the excess capacity. It had gotten to a point then where the enforcement stuff had notable impacts because of it. And then we went through a holiday season in which we had some extra demand. Then we went through weather, et cetera. And you pile all of these on to a market that had finally come into balance, right? And
Mhm.
you've seen rates react. And so we're in a place where supply and demand is in balance. And as long as we're there, that means there's going to be more volatility in the rate environment up until we get sustained improvement in the freight marketplace itself. We got to get more demand in the system. When that happens, then we'll go on a rate growth cycle.
Okay. So we're not even on that cycle right now, is
Nope,
what you're
we're
saying.
not there yet.
Wow.
We're finally back into balance. We're prepared for a shift, but we're not quite there. That's one of the things that'll be very interesting as we go through this year and we get into a growth environment for trucking, not just a capacity whittling. All right. We can't just whittle our way back into growth. We've got to get actual more truckloads needed to get moved to fundamentally shift the marketplace for everyone.
You're right. The legislative part of all this has came in very late. They're always late to the ball game. It seems like in trucking, it's like the knee jerk reaction kind of thing, right? I've said multiple times the worst thing ever happened in trucking was probably the best thing. It was the major wreck that we seen on TikTok in Florida, where people had to start taking notice of the drivers and the CDL issues and things. Have we seen much from that yet, from what the government's doing to get people off the road and what carriers are trying to do to get rid of these non-domicile? Have we seen anything help the market on that yet, or are we still a while for that data really shows up?
We've seen enough where we can say it's having an effect. We haven't seen enough data yet that says that it's having a dramatic effect. All right. So we know that there is, the English language enforcement is occurring. There's out of service violations that are happening. It's enough if it gets sustained over the course of the year to take, 20 or 30,000 drivers off the road. All right. That's enough to be measurable. That's not enough to change the overall market. I mean, we're talking 3 to 4 million drivers that are out there active in the marketplace moving goods of some sort, whether short haul aggregates or long haul.
Is there really a capacity shortage?
No, there's no capacity shortage. It's a tighter capacity market now than we've seen over the last several years. If we had a shortage of capacity, rates jump through the roof immediately, stay up there, and don't move. And we definitely have not seen that.
I want to take a step back going to COVID. Can you speak a little bit on how things looked during that time and what maybe things you looked at to see where we were at? Because I mean, I know it's probably all fresh data to you for the first time. What kind of things did you have to go through to look and analyze to try to give somebody some idea of what was going on? Because none of us really knew.
And you're absolutely right about that. It was new for everybody, right? And so a lot of it is we had to make some assumptions on things that we just didn't know what were actually likely to happen. One thing we had to do for a period of time, usually we got like this monthly cadence, we get some additional data in, we run our forecasting models, we put together our reports, we publish, we run through that cadence, right? We have sort of a natural cadence based on the data. We were running our forecasting model every week for about 3 months, going through the height of the pandemic, because everything was just changing so quickly, nobody could keep up with what was actually happening out there and how quickly it was changing. And, even once we finally started getting through it, we didn't fully recognize how disrupted the capacity side of the equation had been and how quickly the rate environment would move as we got into the back half of 2020. Right, that's when things really started to move quickly. It was that early, right, and then that led into 2021 being such an extremely strong year, basically for that whole year. Right? It wasn't until you got into early 2022 that things really started to soften pretty quickly. So it was an environment in which you had to rely on a bit of saying, I don't know. I don't know exactly if we have this right. I don't know if we have all the information we need to have to make the calls that we typically would make. But we're going to have to use our best judgment and put information out there as quickly and as comprehensively as we can. So that way people have at least the best understanding possible when they are also going through this very opaque situation. None of us knew exactly what the other side what it looked like coming through the end at the other side. So we all had to work together to say, are we seeing anything? Relationships really mattered at that point in time because you had to have people to talk to understand what was happening that day, that week on the ground, right? Because if you're just relying on waiting a week from now to understand what's happening, you're already behind everybody. And you had to have those relationships to be able to talk to people. Whether you're in my position or in your guys' position, you had to have those types of relationships in place to really get through it. Once you got out of it, right? Then the market was just on fire, and it seemed like relationships didn't matter, till everything started going south again, and then you had to rethink all of those assumptions about how the market was going to respond. But it was a learning experience every single week to try to better understand what was the functional things that are driving the marketplace.
I know that brokers are asking like, what are they going to do to protect their margins as the cycle changes? I want to get into that. But, I've been in a consulting position for people who are involved on the carrier side. A lot of these individuals don't have trucking experience. They don't know what they're getting into. They're successful in business, but they've never had real experience in trucking. And I've been involved in three different scenarios where it hasn't ended well. They really can't do much, predicting, and there's really no consistency when it comes to rates, when it comes to maintenance. All these different factors come into play, and the owners of these fleets have a hard time surviving, especially when we're in a down market. So, what do you tell owners of trucking companies who are trying to survive out there, trying to figure out how to manage their business with all these inconsistencies that they're seeing?
One of the things you have to really dive down and understand is what is my final customer and what is their operation like? Even if you're working with a broker, you got to go through the broker to really understand I'm working with a shipper on the end. What does that shipper need? Right? How am I going to support them? And so, again, especially if you're a smaller operation, if you're just relying on the broker to be your relationship expert, you're losing the ability to really understand where you add value. And so you've got to be able to have great relationships with those brokers, but also have relationships with those shippers because that's where you're going to drive. You're driving to the shipper's lot, right? You're not
Hmm.
driving to the broker. And so you got to understand what their issues are and try to solve those issues for them, right? Shippers are trying to do, 100 things, and moving freight is one of them. And so the more that you can solve and be a resource, the better you're going to do. And that doesn't matter if you're 1,000 truck operation or a 20 truck operation. You can help solve those problems for them or be a better partner with them by having those types of discussions. I mean, it doesn't sound great and sexy, right? It's not the latest
It's really,
technology, but
yeah,
it's an important aspect of
it is
running
important. Yeah.
those operations.
Talking about owner operator side of it, freight is so emotional. It's like John said earlier, it's like a roller coaster. It's up and down rates. You don't know what you don't know. A lot of owner operators, they're not well informed about the industry. The most of the industry they know is the DAT board, right? They just know what the price is for that lane like that day. How important is it for discipline and for your data to help make these decisions for the small guy?
We're not going to help that small guy make those decisions, right? We're not going to be on their radar. They're focusing on the day-to-day operations, right? Where we're going to be most beneficial is once they step up, start having a few trucks, and are trying to think through what are next steps rather than what are the current steps, right? So once you start operating a fleet, now you've got to think about more than just what is my next route going to look like. You've got to start planning for what does this route of all of these units look like and how does it start to get optimized and how do I create relationships with shippers and brokers to make that work. And I think that's where we then start to come into play to help them understand. Here's some big picture aspects of what's happening within this broader marketplace, right? There's no single trucking market. There's a whole lot of different trucking markets. All right. But
Oh,
we
well
boil it
said.
up
Yeah.
into this sort of this big metric view of here's what's happening in the marketplace overall, right? It's loosening up or it's tightening up. And that's going to have a different impact on how you might be looking to run your operations. We've seen obviously fleets have been cutting their employment for the last, 2.5 years.
Yeah. Are you advising those fleets on their recruiting strategies?
That's not our focus. Our focus is to help them understand what's happening with the overall capacity environment, right? And what are the expectations for the demand side? Because if we can tell you where that supply and demand metric is headed, all right, then you're going to have a good understanding of making the right decision for your organization. Because as we go through this year, I don't expect to see a lot of fleets, you know, go through layoffs like we've seen over the last couple of years, right? The big question they're going to have now is, do I stay lean, like where I'm at right now, or do I begin to grow and try to take advantage of the opportunities that look like they're coming? So they got to start making those decisions, which is a different set of calculations than what they've been running through for the last couple of years now. So we are in a shifting environment.
Biggest topic nowadays in trucking is, basically fraud. I mean, that's a topic every day, probably as big, if not bigger than the non-CDL drivers and different things. It's run rapid the last couple of years. I say all the time, those guys that are fraudulent carriers and different things, they get smarter every day. They figure out another way to get through a loophole or to stay one step ahead. Does any of your analysis figure that in or help figure out like an area to stay away from because of that? Do y'all do anything like that for fraud?
We don't focus on the fraud area in any real extent. There's a number of individuals that are really highly respected in that realm that we listen to understand what's going on. But like I said, our focus is really trying to understand what is the capacity environment looking like, right? And how is that shifting? And what is the demand environment? And so by focusing on those two items, we can get a pretty good grasp of what that then means for rate expectations going forward. So keying in on those three, fraud doesn't necessarily play a role there. It certainly has a big role in understanding sort of the operational side of both the shippers and the carriers, but it's not one that we really focus on.
If we're sitting here in 2028, 2030, what does the trucking landscape look like compared to what it is today?
I think we're going to be looking at, I think something, if you're looking at it from the outside looking in, is not going to look fundamentally different. All right. We've been operating, I'd say, for the last two, maybe 3 decades in about the same operational way, right? We've added in more tools, we've gotten more efficient, et cetera. But we haven't fundamentally changed the operational side. I don't think that's going to fundamentally change in the next, 4 or 5 years. But I do think there is a groundwork that's going to be getting laid that will fundamentally change the market soon after. One of those key aspects, obviously, is autonomous vehicles, right? We know that they're on the road, they're testing. That testing is going to continue and get enhanced over the next several years, but I don't think it's going to, dramatically roll out and take a whole bunch of freight into the system anytime, in the very near future. Right. So, but I think that is getting developed. It's continuing on a pathway that is going to be a huge shift in how the industry operates sometime here in the next couple of decades. Right. It's not the next 5 years, but in the next couple of decades.
I don't think we have the infrastructure to handle it right now. There's a lot of things that go into that. Just, yes, I know that, they're doing pretty well out in the Permian Basin. They're running some local loads and they're doing some interesting things, like at the ports in California, but we don't really have the infrastructure to handle that. What happens when a truck just stops in the middle of the road? What happens when it needs to refuel or repower? We have a self-driving vehicle now, and when it asks us to take control of the vehicle, it doesn't know how to respond in certain situations that a driver can. So I still think also for the next 20, 25 years, you're at least going to have a driver behind that wheel where it's going to tell the driver, okay, you need to take control.
There's two critical aspects. One's infrastructure, and the other is regulatory slash legal, right?
Right.
The infrastructure stuff we know can get built out. It takes some time, but infrastructure can be known and understood. The other side of that is the legal and the regulatory framework of how those autonomous vehicles will actually operate on the roads safely, legally, as required, right? And so that's the area that probably will take longer to really get it in such a way that it becomes transformative of how the industry operates. So again, I'm with you. I don't think it transforms the industry in, the next 10 years. But thinking out 10 years from there, I think there's an opportunity for it to really start to ramp up and show more growth in different areas and in different aspects of the industry.
It's definitely coming. There's no stopping that. That's just the next wave of our future. Jonathan, before we let you go, give yourself a little plug, let people know where they can find you and how to contact you.
Well, sure. Go to ftrintel.com. You can download some sample information. If you are keeping track of the markets, you can get our information on the spot market each and every week. We work with truckstop.com to look at that information and publish what's happening with volumes, what's happening with rates, some dashboards of that information as well, so you can understand what's going on with the drive-in rates in different regions and flatbed and refrigerated. So there's always information that's available to help us understand what's going on in the marketplace. So go to ftrintel.com and you get access to all of that. And then if you want to think bigger and longer about what these things mean for you and your operations, reach out, a little chat bot, say hi, and we'll be happy to schedule some time and say, here's how we can help you better understand the marketplace.
I will ask you if there's one move that industry leaders should be making right now. Do you know what that is?
I mean, the biggest shift that's probably going to happen in the next 5 years is just the amount of technology that's going to be integrated. The really big fleets are already there, right? I mean, they have essentially a huge tech stack that they're working from. All right, and that's going to have to get filtered down to smaller and smaller operations just because the technology function is just so critically important for doing anything within the modern economy that it's going to get to be a bigger and bigger part of your operation.
Well, Justin, you want to go into our sponsors real quick and then I'll close us out?
We appreciate our sponsors that come on to make this show happen for us. Our first sponsor is Gray Cross, graycross.org. They take care of families that lose a loved one on the road. They take care of hospital bills, funeral bills, groceries. We appreciate them. So if you can donate $1, $5, $10, $20 a month, it would be much appreciated. And it goes to a very great cause. And then our other main sponsor, of course, is ReadyApp, ready-app.com. We're helping drivers with their documents, have one place for their documents to store. They're able to find a job. We'll help them put them in the right spot for that. We've got Broker Verify coming out where drivers are going to get verified. So it helps them, create a better platform for themselves, a safer way for brokers to find their drivers. We're going to have a load board. There's just all types of stuff. So we appreciate everything that ReadyApp's doing. Go check them out, ready-app.com.
Ready-app.com and graycross.org. If you found value in today's conversation, please share this episode with your operations team, with brokerage partners, other drivers, executive leadership. Jonathan, we really want to appreciate you for coming on the show. Thanks for joining us on Behind the Wheelhouse.
Appreciate the time, Jonathan.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, John.